Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, episode 49.
Creating a grazing plan of what trials and tribulations may arise through the growing season is very, very crucial.
You're listening to the Grazing Grass Podcast, helping grass farmers learn from grass farmers. And every episode features a grass farmer and their operation. I'm your host, Cal Hardage. On today's show, we have Leevi Stump of the Greenacres Foundation. He's the livestock manager, and we're going to talk about lots of livestock species today and the regenerative practices that the Greenacres Foundation have been using for decades. But before we talk to Leevi, can you do me a favor? Go to the grazinggrass.com website and sign up for our email list. Also, if you are listening to this and haven't subscribed or left us a review wherever you listen to the podcast, please do so. And last week we had 10 minutes about my farm. Actually, we didn't, but I did say 10 minutes. We had 10 seconds. I have some really exciting news that I think we will be talking about next week. Not exciting news for the podcast, but exciting news for my farm, and I'm looking forward to telling you that. But I'm waiting. It should finish up just shortly. Let's talk to Leevi. Leevi, we want to welcome you to the Grazing Grass Podcast. We're excited for you to join us today.
Awesome. It's great to be here. It's a great opportunity.
Thank you, Leevi. Leevi, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing there?
Yeah, not a problem. My name's Leevi. I'm the livestock manager here at Greenacres Foundation that's located in Cincinnati, Ohio. We have a couple other properties that we've purchased over the past few years. But a little bit about myself. I did not grow up in farming whatsoever. Went to college in the hopes to go pre-vet, as most young kids had aspirations to be. I did not grow up in a rural area. There was agriculture around me, but I was not involved in the tiniest of bits. I was playing sports year round. I was living in town, this and that, but I just loved animals, wanted to go pre-vet. And I went to Wilmington College, and first semester I realized that type of schooling was not for me. That work had a lot of work, a lot of years, heavily invested, a lot of knowledge, but I took a couple agriculture courses as an intro and just really wanted to get involved more of understanding where my food came from, which was something I've always had a knack for, is just knowing where my food came from. So I kind of stuck with it and got a degree in agriculture with a concentration in animal science from Wilmington College. Had a 5-month internship up in Dayton at Allwood Audubon. And that kind of really solidified my interest of caring for animals, farm animals specifically. And after that 5-month internship, I was fortunate to find an opportunity to start out as a farmhand here at Greenacres Foundation. And that was back in May of 2017. And I've kind of just worked through the ranks. And now I'm the livestock manager here at Greenacres. And the rest is just history. And it's been a blessing so far. And I hope it continues to bless me and my wife and my family and everything that we're doing here. So it's great.
Very good. And, a lot of people head to college with one thing in mind and then end up with something else. Yeah, I've been there myself. So tell us what you're doing at Greenacres.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's always a good start to go back and look at how Greenacres started. And over 30 years ago, our founders, the late Louis and Louise Nipper, created Greenacres as a way to give back to our community and just share the wonderful opportunities that we have here. They taught us to respect and conserve our natural environments through good stewardship and generative farming practices. They instilled in us the appreciation of music and fine arts and just to value our history. It's great. Mrs. Nipper was really into the fine arts and Mr. Nipper was really into agriculture. And together they created a great opportunity to get the best of both worlds. And through that, they established many different types of education that we do here. We have music education, arts education, agriculture education, environmental education, water quality education, just providing many opportunities for tens and thousands of students to come to Greenacres and provide an authentic field trip to see something that they'd never seen before. And it's great that we're able to do that here. And in addition to that, we are a production farm, and that's kind of where I come into play. In addition to the education, we have a full livestock team here. We raise just about every type of livestock animal that you can think of. We 100% grass-fed and finished beef and sheep. We raise about 4,200 meat chickens a year on pasture. We raise 500 turkeys on pasture for Thanksgiving. We raise about 34 head of hogs throughout the year. So just about anything you can think of on a generative farm, we raise
Sounds like you have enough there to keep you busy.
year round.
Yes. Now, they started the farm, I'm glancing at the website, about 70 years ago, and they were from the beginning very interested in regenerative practices and conservation.
Yes, that is part of our mission here at Greenacres is to preserve our land. I think one of the quotes that we use often here is, "We do not inherit the earth from our grandparents; we borrow it from our grandchildren," and that is from Chief Seattle. It's one of the things that we pride ourselves in here is that we're setting up what we do here for future generations. We want to leave our legacy behind and improve the land for the future and not just in the present and now. And that's what regenerative farming is about.
Yeah, so very important. And I think it's wonderful you guys are getting kids out there. We need more of that, exposing children to agriculture. We're moving further away from it, but it's just so important. Levi, let's talk a little bit about your livestock there. We'll start with your beef cattle. Can you tell us a little bit more about your beef cattle?
Yeah, we have registered Black Angus. We have a cow-calf operation as well as a feeder-finisher operation. We really focus on our genetics in our herd. And looking at genetics, you think, pre-industrial times before there were feedlots and stuff, is how were animals raised, what type of genetics were there. So we look at, the wide genetics, the low-line genetics. Some people often refer to Aberdeen Angus. It's the smaller breed genetics that are kind of built to be grazing grass and to finish on grass. I think one of the analogies I like to use, for others to understand is you don't see a giraffe in Africa grazing on the ground. So why do we have, 1,600 to 2,000 pound animals that are extremely tall that you're used to seeing in a feedlot trying to finish on grass? So having those smaller, stout, we like to look at the 60-40, 40% legs, 60% body that are meant to be grazing on grass. And we've noticed over the years that it definitely pays its dividends to have animals like that on pasture because you're able to finish more animals. And in the same amount of time that it would to take a 1,600 pound animal, you can have 2,000 pound animals at the same time. So you're looking at stocking density, animal impact. You're able to have more animals and finish more animals versus having larger animals that take a little bit longer to finish out.
Yes, which is wonderful for what we're doing. Let's talk about your cow herd first, and then we'll get back to finishing on grass because I do want to talk about that. With your cow herd, what practices are you using with them?
That's a great question. We are 100% grass-fed and finished. We are rotating our animals around constantly. So when it comes to herbicide and pesticide use, we do not use any of that. We try to manage our cattle by rotating through to help break up any of those parasite cycles, fly cycles, and things of that nature, and provide supplemental mineral for them to kind of help compensate with that. So they're getting what they need from foraging grass, and then what they're not getting from grass, they're getting from our mineral, free choice mineral that we provide. The reason that we don't use herbicides and pesticides is looking at generative farming is we don't want to have those type of inputs into our herd because that's money that we're spending on stuff like that, and B, you're looking at beneficial insects and soil health. You're affecting that whole ecology. So we try to find ways to mitigate that through rotational grazing, and that's how we maintain all of that.
And how often are you moving your cows?
All of our herds, for the most part, are moved on a daily basis from one section to the next. So we are typically a 24-hour paddock rotation from one to the next. Depending on the time of year, or if we have a cow calf herd that has a lot of young calves on the ground, we try not to move them as often. When I say as often, it's from 1 day to 3 to 4 days, because we're also looking at grass and soil. And if you leave cattle in the same area longer than 4 days, when that grass starts to regrow, they become what I like to call mosaic grazers. They like to pick and choose, versus moving them through to get the impact, to get the manure distribution. And we're not allowing them to be selective grazers, because at that point, when they become selective grazers, they're going to eat the quality stuff. And when you do that repeatedly, what happens, and I'm sure you know, if grazing your own animals, is that the less desirable forages then decide to take over. So it's a constant battle of the give and take of impact, and how to move animals through pasture to ensure that you're leaving quality forages to compete, but you're also dampening the weed pressure and less desirable forages. So it's, there's a million ways to do the same thing. And I know a lot of farmers, I've heard leave a third, eat a third, trample a third. I've heard eat half, leave half. So there's many ways to do it, but it really ultimately, the deciding factor is how your operation works and what fits your system and how you're managing. And that's kind of what we base a lot of our work around here.
When you said multiple herds, are you grazing your grass or your yearlings with your cow herd?
No, we have our cow calf operation. So we have a fall and spring calving group, both separate. We leave our calves on for 7 to 8 months, or our window is more 6 to 8 months, and we'll wean. And then we have a separate herd after we wean. They become our feeder finisher herd. So we keep them separate. We have a cow calf and a feeder finisher herd.
And one thing you mentioned there that was unexpected to me, you have a fall calving herd as well?
That is correct. Yeah. A lot of people go back and forth on, what is the right time to have animals, spring or fall. And I've heard many different people say many different things. This is the reason why they have a fall calving group. This is the reason why we have a spring calving group. One of the things I think it's Jim Garish is he looks at, what animals do in nature, and look at deer and buffalo and bison. A lot of them are fall calving, and it seems to work out pretty well for them. And we've had a fall and spring calving group for the past couple of years, and we haven't really seen much of a difference of which one is better and which one's worse. And I think a lot of that boils down to management too, and what type of forages you have and the time of year that you see calves hitting the ground. But one of the reasons that we tend to have a fall and calving season group is it gives us a little bit more variability throughout the year to have animals finished on grass. So we're widening the opportunity to finish animals throughout the year, and not kind of just focus on a certain time of the year. And we're also building our herd as well. So this herd we've had here for about 5 years now, and we're looking at genetics and those animals that we have. We got some really great heifers that we kept this past year for the first time, that were first time heifers, had some great calves. Looking at their genetics, docility, performance in a fescue dominant pasture, because we're in the fescue bell, if I failed to mention that already, how well their weaning weights are, their birth weights. So we look at all of those, and they're all deciding factors on whether we keep animals and or keep them for market. And, when you're growing and have a feeder finisher herd and a cow calf herd, I always joke about it. It's difficult, to try to finish animals in a 24-month period, and having an operation of a cow calf and feeder finisher, because the best growing ones, the best steers or the best bulls and the best heifers are growing great, but those are animals that you want to keep back to keep in the herd, so you keep that genetic line going. So we're in those growing pains, if you will, of having those animals, of creating that environment. Eventually, once we get that herd set, we're going to have the best of both worlds of being able to finish out animals in that 18 to 22 months on grass-fed and finished operation, and also be able to keep back the best heifers and bulls to continue that genetic line.
Yeah, and that all makes sense, with the discussion fall versus spring. That's a discussion my dad and I have all the time. His herd is fall calving and my herd spring calving. You're a little bit north of us, but you're still within that fescue belt. Do you do any cool season annuals or anything to extend your grazing season?
Oh, absolutely. We plant cool season annuals in addition to warm season annuals to get through that summer slump. Being in the fescue belt, we're in an area that we have, infected fescue that can be very less palatable for our cattle and cause fescue toxicity. So we try to mitigate that by planting warm season annuals, and that works out really well for us. But in the spring and fall, we definitely plant, annual rye. We broadcast some clovers in the wintertime with some frost seeding, and working with our research team, we're always finding ways to be better, to provide quality forages for our cattle and all of our enterprises, in addition to creating quality soil to establish good perennials. That's not just fescue. We're looking at establishing perennial rye, timothy, orchard grass. We've been investigating the past year or so of trying to plant novel fescue to compete with our endophyte infected fescue to help improve our pastures that way. That's better for our animals, because you read online, you read many articles talking about fescue. It's a great forage, but at the same time, it loses billions of dollars in the beef industry, mostly due to its vasoconstricting abilities of fescue toxicity and average daily gains and getting cattle ready to be finished on grass. It hinders the process, and we're always investigating ways to hinder that and to mitigate that and be able to finish animals in a fescue belt in 22 months or so.
So is your target date for finishing 22 to 24 months, or about that range?
That's about that range, exactly. I think last time I looked, the national average is 28 plus on a grass-fed and finished operation. The past 2 years, was it 2020, 2021, our average age going to market was anywhere from 24 and a half to 25 months. And we had some really good animals going that year. And we take those numbers and each year look at how can we improve that. And the best way to improve that is A, looking at genetics, and then B, looking at pasture management. So we're always focusing on those two, because they work together. You can't have one and not the other, because you can have the best genetics in the world, but if you're not grazing quality forages or looking at soil health, you're not going to get anywhere, and then vice versa. So we're fortunate here. We have a great crew on the livestock team, and we have a great research team that work in tandem of looking at soil health and looking at our forages, and always continue to ask of how we can do better. Because if you're not asking that question, you're only going to be mediocre.
So what are some of your goals or things you're trying to do to improve it?
A lot of the things when it comes to pastures is we're looking at getting more perennial forages established. Cool season forages, just to explain, we're looking at getting, some more timothy, novel fescue, orchard grass. And then another thing that we're doing of looking at improving soil health in our forages is, one of the questions that's asked a lot is talking about drought and how people plan for that. And here, we're fortunate in Ohio where we're at, that's not too much of a problem, but it is slowly but surely starting to move this way. So we're looking at getting native warm season grasses established. And that's where our research team really comes into play. We've done some studies with University of Tennessee of getting 10 acres at one of our other farms established in native warm season grasses. And that's been going on for about 3 years now, and we've been seeing some really good results. So now we're focusing on some of our pastures at our other farms that are a little bit in poor health that could use some work. And those seem to be the best areas of focus to get native warm seasons established. So we got about 20 acres almost here at our Indian Hill location in Cincinnati that we're looking to revamp and get native warm season established, like big blue stem, little blue stem, Indian grass. I think that's a great start for us of being drought tolerant, and also to be able to get through that summer slump to continue to have quality forages for a grass-fed and finished operation,
Oh, yes.
including habitat. And that's one of the big reasons too, is talking about, back in the day, the buffalo grazing the prairies and the habitat and how that was maintained. So we're taking all of that in stride with the work that we're doing. It's not just for the animals that we raise and maintain ourselves, but it's also looking at the environment, the ecology, and the habitat that surrounds to make sure that all of that's working in tandem. And that's one of the big focuses of generative farming.
Yes. When you think about your grass finished versus your cow calf, what are some management practices you're doing different in those two cases?
A lot of the times, our cow calf operation is we got a pretty solid herd, and their nutritional requirements are a little bit different than a growing animal that we're trying to take to market. So we've kind of dabbled with different scenarios and how we manage our cattle. Jim Garish visited our farm back in 2019, and one of the things that we trialed was a leader follow. And we led with our feeder finisher herd because, the feeder finisher herd, you want to take the top 2 inches. That's where the most nutrition is in those forages. So we hit that and then moved on. And then right behind, we followed with our cow calf group as our, what we like to call our maintenance group. So their requirements weren't as strong as the feeder finisher. So we were able to get the best of both worlds of having quality forages for our feeder finisher to have, 2 to 3 pound ADG, and then come through with our cow calf to still get the second, third bite that's still nutritious, just not as quality as the first bite, to meet their demand of milk production and, just maintaining their weight, whether they had a calf on them or not. That seemed to work out pretty well for us, especially in the springtime, to stay on top of the spring flush, because the spring flush around here is, one day you don't have grass and the next day you have more than you can handle. So trying to find ways to handle that. And that's one of the things that we've done in the past, and that seemed to work out really well for us.
Another question I have for you on your grass finished beef, are you finishing just the steers and heifers you're not keeping for your herd, and are you finishing all of them, or do you have a preference?
That is correct. As of right now, all the steers that we have for sure are going to market. As far as our heifers, that's something that, as our herd grows, we're looking into their genetics more, and are those genetics that we want to keep? And if they're not, we keep them in our feeder finisher herd, because we're also looking at, if we look at selling heifers, if we weren't going to keep them, why would we want to sell them to others? Because we want to ensure that we're providing other heifers, other cows that we have to other farms, if we provide to sell a market and a quality animal for them as well. We've been fortunate from the farms that we've worked with in the past of getting quality genetics and animals, and we've weeded through that with, looking at birthing weights, weaning weights, how well they performed with a calf and without a calf. And if they don't meet those requirements for us, they're going to go into our feeder market versus our heifer market or a cow market to sell our genetics to other farms.
Yeah, that makes great sense to me. Perfect sense.
And in addition to that, one of the things that we're looking at more is the low line genetics. I think you're familiar with, like with Aberdeen, the smaller style. So we actually in the past done some embryo transfer work, and we got 6 bulls. The Lodge of Y, he's a well-known bull back in the day, and along with Copeland of Y, which are low-line Angus genetics. We got those animals this past December. We got 6 bulls and 1 heifer, and obviously the heifer stayed in our program. And we have 6 bulls. We intend to keep 1 or 2 of them as they grow to see how they perform. But with those genetics, we're also looking at getting them sold. And that's something we're working with our marketing team, is to sell those bulls to other farms that are interested in generative farming and a grass-fed and finished operation of the smaller genetics, but have that prime, have that marbling quality weights that you want to see in a grass-fed and finished operation.
Yes, very good. And moving on, Do you run your sheep with your cattle, or are they managed separately?
I love that you asked that question. That is something that we've been working on and talking about for the past several years now. And in this past year, we purchased in 50 more ewe lambs. And just about 2 months ago, we integrated and created our first flerd. And we are excited about, the trials and tribulations that may arise from that. But all the studies and work that we've done leading towards has been good. And it was at the point is why haven't we tried it yet? So we finally got the sheep integrated with one of our cow-calf groups. We kept them separate for a while just as a training process to get them used to polywire lines, getting them trained to us. We like to use alfalfa pellets to train them to get them to move. And once we got that established and got them to start moving, we integrated them with our flerd. And so far, it's been great. One of the things I've read and heard from many people is you can have one ewe per cow and it not affect your grazing plan. And so far, I can say that we are seeing that our rotations have not changed. Our cattle seem to be grazing a little bit differently than the sheep. And then also you look at the benefits of having a flerd together is the symbiotic relationship of the parasite loads. They say parasites that are detrimental to cattle die in the rumen of a sheep and vice versa. So we're hoping to create those type of relationships with our flerds, and that will also help mitigate having to use dewormers or worry about parasite loads because they're working together to break up that cycle. Because our goal with our animals is to intervene as least possible. Because if we're having to intervene and worm or maintain and care for animals in that sense, you're losing money, you're losing gains, and overall it's just not good for yourself or that flerd. So we take all of that in stride of what we're doing to make sure that we're making the right practice decisions.
And with your flerd, are you running some livestock guardian animals with them as well?
We are not. That is something that we have been asked a lot about in the past. And one of the things about 2 years ago, we were raising turkeys on pasture, and in one night we had some coyote pressure and lost a good chunk of our turkeys due to that coyote pressure. And at that time, we had 2 bulls that weren't in with our cow-calf herd for breeding or anything. So the question was, is there such thing as a guardian bull? So we put them in, and after we put them in, we had 0 issues with any of that type of pressure. So we're thinking with their size and just their presence in the pasture, it kind of eliminates any concern of our sheep or our poultry or anything to be susceptible to that type of pressure. I have the luxury of living on site and getting to see some of this stuff firsthand. And in this past winter, we had about 18 ewes and their lambs with one of our bulls overwintering in a pasture right next to my house. And one evening I was looking out my window and I saw 2 coyotes standing in the pasture in which the sheep were in. So as always, I put on my muck boots and ran out in the field thinking that I was going to be able to do something. And by the time I got out there, every single one of the sheep was standing behind the bull, and that bull was standing up looking in the direction that the coyotes were. And that just goes to show the relationship that those animals have with each other, and that if you just give them the opportunity, it flourishes on its own. And it's amazing to see that happen from not wanting to interact with each other to relying on each other for safety. And it's amazing to see those opportunities and things just happen.
Do you notice those animals hanging out together, or are they just in the same area? And due to the closeness of the bull, they're going over for that protection?
As of right now with our flerd, it's such a young relationship so far that when they're grazing, they're intermixed, but when it comes to laying down and settling down for the night, they're separate. But in the past, when we integrated all of our wethers with our our bulls, if you visit our Instagram page, our ram is with our bulls, and there are photos of them just laying down with each other, legs sprawled out all over each other, just chilling and having a good time. So it's a little bit of both, but we've seen a lot more commingling over the past 2 months with the newly established flerd. You just got to give it time, and the more time they become more comfortable with each other, and so far that's definitely shown.
Very interesting. I remember reading a research article where they bonded weaned ewe lambs with open heifers, and they were talking about certain amount of time with them before those heifers were 18 months old and those lambs were newly weaned, and they would bond and stay together. And when they put them with the flock, the flock kind of moves by consensus and that leader ewe, and for them to stay with the cattle most of the time, they had to have a majority of the sheep had to have been bonded with those cattle, which was very interesting. And I did try one year doing something like that, but I didn't have great success, but that's probably more on me than what everyone else does. However, since then, I don't run my cattle and sheep together. My sheep kind of have their mind of their own. But one hindrance I have to that are my livestock guardian dogs, because they tolerate the cows, but they're not real big fans of them, which I'm hoping that gets better over time, but that's just the issue I've had.
Yeah. And one of the reasons that we haven't considered and looked more into the guardian dogs is just because we're also an educational farm, and bringing in tens and thousands of students, we are concerned of, what the role of a guardian dog is. So we try to utilize all of our enterprises working together to help mitigate those type of predation issues. And so far it's worked out pretty well for us.
Very good. Very good. You also grass finish your lambs. At what age do you finish them?
Our sheep operation is on the rise. The past couple of years, we bought in some feeder lambs to finish out. But this year, in the past few years, we bought 10 Katahdin ewes. And then this past year, we bought in 50, just a commercial flock of a cross between Katahdin and Dorper with a little bit of Romanov and Polypay. We really like the hair type sheep, especially in our type of operation. That means no shearing. They shed out on their own, so that's less work for the livestock team to worry about. And as we continue to grow, we went from 10 sheep to 60 rather quickly. And then, sheep have a tendency to have twins. So if we're looking at that, we're also increasing next year another 160% from 10 to 50 to potentially 150. We want to try to look at how we can improve efficiencies and not spend too much time and effort and work. So looking at the hair type sheep has really helped. And there's also a lot of studies out there that say hair type sheep are somehow a little bit more not as susceptible to parasite loads and perform better in a grass-fed and finished operation. So those are things that we account for when we're growing our operation. But our goal is to have our sheep go to market around 8 to 10 months. So, we like to keep them as lambs. And right now we have a pretty good market. We're nowhere where we need to be in our sheep market. We got people all the time asking, when we're going to have lamb available. And that's one of the reasons why we're really increasing our lamb operation or sheep operation. But our goal is to have animals, our sheep ready 8 to 10 months around Easter time to take to market. We have a pretty big market for Easter lamb.
So you're lambing those in midsummer?
More like, about mid-spring, where we are expected our first lamb end of April, early May.
Oh, okay.
That'll put us around, the 8 to 10, under 12 months.
Oh, yes. And you got to allow some time for processing and stuff. Yes.
So those are all things that we account for. And we found it better to be lambing kind of late spring when forages are booming versus, about midsummer, especially in the fescue belt when you're looking at fescue toxicity and making sure that we're meeting nutritional demands for our animals to improve average daily gains and to make sure that they're keeping their condition and having quality milk for the lambs to grow.
Very good, Levi. We talked about kind of you might even say the big two when we talk about regenerative ag, cattle and sheep. But you all have a few more species there. Let's go through those just a little bit and find out what you're doing and how you're doing that. And we can start with those pasture poultry.
Awesome. Yeah. We raise about 4,200 meat birds, primarily Cornish cross, which is the most common meat bird that you'll get, whether it's from your local producer or going to Kroger or Meijer or whatever other big store chain you have in your area. One of the things that we do with our meat birds is raise them on pasture. The first 3 to 4 weeks, I should say, they are raised indoors in a brooding system just to ensure they're feathering out nice, they're meeting their heat requirements, feed requirements before we move them out on pasture. And then week 3, week 4, we move them out onto pasture, and then they're out on pasture the remainder of their span on the farm. And the way that we manage that is we have some awesome fabricators on hand. I always like to say, if you dream it, they can build it. And so far, that's been true. During COVID, we had a lot of concern of meat shortages, and the quickest turnaround in meat protein was to increase broiler production. So we went from raising 1,800 meat birds to 4,200 overnight. And the way that we were able to do that is having our staff on hand, the livestock team, in addition to our estate crew and their fabricators, building our chicken tractors that we can utilize in our pasture to maintain the amount of animals that we had. Our chicken tractors are about 11.5 by 18 feet, so we can raise about 100 to 125 broilers per tractor pretty comfortably, and we move them each day to a fresh patch of forage. So in addition to foraging on pasture, we do supplement with grain just to make sure that they're meeting their nutritional requirements and getting good gains before they go to market. And it's a little bit more work and more tedious being out in pasture because there's more moving parts when you look at water, feed, moving the equipment. But overall, it's better for us workers. I'm not having to be in a building that is enclosed, worrying about ventilation, ammonia buildup, or any of those nasty airborne illnesses and diseases that can happen from an enclosed building. And then it's also great for the birds because out on pasture, we're allowing our birds to be birds, move around, forage, eat bugs, scratch through the soils, the grasses, eat fresh clover. And it's just overall better for them. And it's also great for pasture because then they're applying their nitrogen dense manure straight into our pasture for us. So it's a win-win all around for us. And it's a great enterprise to see it all work in tandem of having multi-species grazing. Multi-species grazing isn't just sheep and cattle. You put in the poultry and all their benefits into that pasture and how all of that creates quality soil health, and that promotes better forages and all around better quality of life for the ecology and the animals that you're raising.
I was looking through your Instagram feed. I was hoping to see your chicken tractor. I don't see one there. And I was doing it kind of quickly, so I may have just missed it. Mm-hmm. But you are able to move that by hand each day?
The ones that we have we do not move by hand. We do have gators and a type of UTV to move them. But we are fortunate of the way that we raise them is other farms can do exactly the same thing as far as moving animals around. John Suskovich has a great chicken tractor plan to be able to move by hand. Joel Salatin's chicken tractor plan and great to move by hand. It's cool to see other farms and how they adapt to essentially do the exact same thing that we do, and or we're doing the exact same thing that they're doing, just a little bit different. So it's cool that everything that we are doing here can be done at scale, whether it's large or small, and are able to adapt to fit everybody else's systems. And that's really the biggest goal that we're trying to promote is, we may be able to do things differently and have more equipment to do things, but it can be done. And that's where we're here to help educate how they can be done and show that it can be done. So that's just one of the cool things, especially in farming. It's just there's so many different ways to do the same thing, and that's improving soil and improving your forages, and improving the ecology, and improving everything. And it doesn't matter if you have equipment or just your hands; it can still be done.
So true with that, as we experience on the different episodes of this podcast. People are using those same underlying practices and theories, but they're doing it in their own way, which is so wonderful to highlight and see how everyone's doing it. Turkeys, you all also do turkeys. Tell us just a little bit about your turkey operation.
We do. Our turkeys are also pasture-raised turkeys, same as our meat chickens. We raise them the first few weeks in a brooder just to make sure they're meeting their nutritional demands, heat demands, and requirements, and feather out nicely to be able to handle the environment of being out on pasture. Turkeys are a lot more finicky than meat birds or really any of our pasture-raised animals. Turkeys are a unique breed, especially in a pasture-raised setting. But we raise our turkeys for Thanksgiving. That is our market. We get our turkeys the first week of August, and they're on property for 16 to 17 weeks before they're finished out. We raise them indoors for the first couple weeks of their life, and then we move them into those chicken tractors that I was talking about briefly before for another couple of weeks, just to help make sure that they're growing well and protected by any aerial predators or ground predators at their enclosure. And after they gain a little bit of weight and a pretty good size, they're less susceptible to that aerial predation. And that's when we release them onto pasture, and we utilize Premier One fencing, the poultry netting, and it works out pretty well for us. We give them, they have about 20,000 square feet of area to roam at all times, but about every day to day and a half, we give them access to a fresh 10,000 square foot. So we're constantly moving them through our pastures to have their impact, and also provide quality forages through them as we're moving through pastures. And that again is where we utilize our guardian bulls out in pasture to help mitigate any of that ground pressure that you may see. And up here where we're at, most of our ground predation we see is actually more through raccoons than it is coyotes or fox. So we've been working at ways to work around that. And then our aerial predation is where we're at. We got a pretty heavy raptor population, a lot of red-tailed hawks, red-shouldered hawks, Cooper's hawks, and then nighttime we got quite a few great horned owls around here that at times can pick off one of our turkeys here and there for a late night snack. But we've been fortunate with our rotation and waiting till they're an appropriate size to help mitigate that, to really, for the most part, eliminate any of that aerial predation.
What weight are you finishing your turkeys at?
Oh man, that is a wonderful question. Our biggest goal, it seems like our consumers and myself, is that 18 to 20 pound range. It's kind of the perfect size for a roasting turkey to fit in the oven or to deep fry or smoke. If you get too much bigger than that, it gets a little bit tricky because a lot of leftovers. But I would say our range for sure is about the 18 to 20 pound. And we do a straight run, so we get a combination of hen and jakes. So our weights always depend because hens grow a little bit slower than the males do. But one of the ways that we try to make sure that we're in line with how we're feeding our birds is we periodically will just randomly grab 15 to 20 turkeys, weigh them, and kind of take the average of that to kind of see where we're at, and do we need to provide more feed? Do we need to lessen feed to make sure that we're getting the weights that we're shooting for going into Thanksgiving time?
Yes. And what breed or variety are you using for your turkey?
Last year we switched and went to broad-breasted bronze. In past years we've done broad-breasted white. It's pretty common. It's kind of what we've always done. In the past we used to raise about 400 turkeys, about 300 broad-breasted white and 100 broad-breasted bronze. And anecdotally, through the growing season, it always seemed that the broad-breasted bronze were more hardy. They filled out better, they looked better, they weren't as susceptible to predation or any type of ailments. And I believe it was 2020, 2019, 2020. We had our an outbreak of erysipelas, which really affects a turkey flock, and we saw that hit our broad-breasted whites pretty hard. So the next year we trialed and just did a couple more broad-breasted bronze, and granted we did a lot less, but every single one of those broad-breasted bronze that we had went to market, and a good chunk of the broad-breasted white that we had, we saw some mortality and saw some more erysipelas happen. So at the end of that year, the team kind of sat down and talked through everything, and it seemed we were all on the same page that, next year we're going to try broad-breasted bronze. So we trialed that. Not only did we trial that, but we also increased from 400 turkeys to 525. And it was hands down the best season that we had for a turkey season, and had over 500 turkeys go to the processor and had some quality weights. So our anecdotal evidence was right on path with just stating that the broad-breasted bronze were more hardy and fit for a pasture-raised setting. So moving forward, that is the breed that we're working with. And one of the downfalls of raising broad-breasted bronze is, they're bronze, so their pin feathers are a little bit darker. And when you take them to the processor, not every one of those pin feathers is removed. So where a broad-breasted white, they got the white pin feathers, so they're not as visible when you're processing or prepping your turkey for Thanksgiving. So that's one of the cool things of being an educational farm too, is educating our consumers of understanding why there's black pin feathers and where they came from, and just educating them that it's the breed of animal, but the quality of animal and the turkey that you're eating is no different than if it was a broad-breasted white.
Very good. Very good. Let's talk real quickly about pigs. I think y'all do pigs. Just tell us a little bit about how that looks on your all's farm.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another enterprise that has been growing over the past few years. When I first started here a little over 5 years ago, we were raising about 14 head throughout the year. And one of being an educational farm and working with research is we were putting them in wooded areas. And where we're at is we have a lot of invasive honeysuckle. So one of the questions was, were pigs able to kind of disrupt and root up that immature honeysuckle to set it back? The answer is yes, that they were, especially the immature stuff, but the mature honeysuckle was still there. So it essentially, they opened up the canopy a little bit, but then we had to go in mechanically and remove that mature honeysuckle to kind of open up the canopy floor. So taking that information and putting him in, dense areas that, cattle or sheep aren't going to be all that great or excel at, is putting them in to help disrupt that soil, open up that canopy, and then we go in, remove multiflora rose, honeysuckle, or any other invasives, and then be able to broadcast or plant cool season forages and essentially create a silvopasture in areas that were pretty dense before. That's kind of been our approach now, is looking at our pastures where we have woody areas in our pastures that we don't get quality impact from our sheep or cattle, is putting pigs in those areas to help disrupt that area and see what happens after that, and then to be able to go through and clean up any multiflora rose or bramble or anything like around the trees to help open that canopy up more to create quality forages to establish in those areas. And that's been an ongoing process for the past going on 2 years now. So we're still in the trialing process, but right now we're seeing some of the results that we were hoping to see, and hopefully we can continue moving forward with that and utilize them in ways that we can't utilize sheep and cattle.
Sounds like a great utilization of pigs and their natural abilities. And I know that was just really quick on pigs. I'm looking at the time, and I'm always concerned and not wanting the episode to go too long. So we're going to wrap up and move to our famous 4 questions. Same 4 questions we ask of all of our guests. Levi, what is your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
Have been listening to your podcast and hear that all the time, and I could talk about so many. But a few of the ones that I'd like to hit are definitely, I think one of the recent podcasts you had with a gentleman named Callahan was talking about the Talking Cow podcast. I love listening to that one. That's just a good filler podcast to be listening to when you're out in the field doing this and that.
Oh, yes.
But when it comes to book resources, I have several to name. They're right here to my right. I think that they're just quality resources, especially in regenerative farming and or just like starting your own homestead or getting started. And I'll just go through that list. And Kick the Hay Habit by Jim Garish is a good read of understanding pasture management and how to help be able to mitigate feeding hay in the wintertime. Gabe Brown, who's big in the regenerative farming realm, Dirt to Soil. It's a great book. Another one is it Alan Williams, Before You Have a Cow. That was one of the first books I read when I got into farming. Sarah Flack has a book called The Art and Science of Grazing. When I really first got interested and intrigued in rotational grazing and grazing animals, that was the first book purchase that I had, and it's been great. And she also has quite a few videos and resources on YouTube. The Temple Grandin Guide to Working with Farm Animals, to kind of understand how animals work. I would say animal psychology is my most favorite part about farming. So Temple Grandin is a big resource for me and somebody I admire greatly when it comes to working animals. With that being said, one of the things I failed to mention is Temple Grandin visited Greenacres back in 2016. We actually have a cattle handling facility that was built with her being around and her guidance, and Mark Deasing creating the blueprints of just using cattle's natural instincts to move around. So it's cool to have a state-of-the-art facility like that designed with input from Temple Grandin, and it's named after her, the Temple Grandin handling facility here at Greenacres, and it's very cool. And then the last one, looking more into grass-fed and finished beef, which I think is another one that Callahan talked about in your last podcast that I heard, was grass-fed cattle. Was it from Julius Rochelle? Sorry if I butchered that name, but that's more of like a book to flip through for guidance and just to take notes and always to refer to. And then, of course, Joel Salatin has many books and resources out there to look at. So many to choose from.
There is, and the ones you listed are excellent resources. The thing that jumped out to me was Temple Grandin, and I actually had on my notes for the episode asking about your Temple Grandin facilities and see if she designed them, because I saw they were named after her, which is, I think, just so exciting. But I also think that may be the first time we've had her name come up on the podcast, which is interesting.
It's very surprising.
Yeah, but a lot of times people are focused more on the grass portion of it rather than the handling of livestock. But that low stress handling book, I can't even think of the full title of it. I love, and just it's made a tremendous impact on the way I'm around my cattle, and now I get everybody else to go up to the barn, leave me alone, I'll take care of this. But, I think that's an excellent resource as well as those others you listed.
Absolutely.
Secondly, what tool could you not live without?
I got two, and one of them is pretty cliche. With where I'm at and having stacked enterprises and how we do things here of, education and so many different departments working together, is having a team. There's no way that I could do what I'm doing without the support of the team behind me, of being out in the field every day, working together. Farming is not easy. It's difficult. It can be time consuming. It can be frustrating, upsetting, tedious, meticulous, but you got to be able to find the joy in it. And having a team that wants to be here, that enjoys learning, that promotes growth, promotes opportunity, and being able to feed off of each other's energy, which one person's strength is another person's weakness. There's no way that Greenacres and the livestock team would be where it's at without having that type of relationship. And then from a farming aspect, some people don't think of it as a tool, but it's the eyeballs right here, being out in the field and making observations and observing things. I think 2 eyes out in the field every day is probably the most important tool that you can have in your toolbox.
Yeah, making those observations and reflecting on them, I think that's a great selection or great choice there. The team aspect is one that, like, well, for myself, I guess I could say I have a team in that my dad and I do this very closely together, and then I get to talk to all the wonderful people on the podcast, but a lot of people don't have that. Maybe they have a mentor, which is really important to get into if you're getting started, someone who's been there to tell you. But that's one of the reasons I started the Grazing Grass community, trying to establish that as a way we have some like-minded people out there that we can talk to and gain feedback from. I think you're extremely lucky there, Leevi, with that team you have and the amazing resources you have.
Absolutely.
When you were getting started, what do you wish you knew, or what would you tell someone that was just getting started?
That is a fantastic question, and I ask myself that quite often. And I would say for myself is understanding the importance of time management. Time management is extremely important and crucial to any operation, and it doesn't have to just be with farming. It could be with your day-to-day job or your home life, or it qualifies for every part of your life. And I found that to be very crucial. And then for the day-to-day stuff with farming is having a game plan, creating a grazing plan of, what trials and tribulations may arise through the growing season, what variables can dictate whether you're going to move animals in this field or next. So always thinking about the next step ahead and having a game plan, I think is very, very crucial.
Excellent advice. I just recently had a conversation with a coworker at my off-the-farm job, and she was talking about the things she was doing to prepare for advancement. And I gave her some suggestions of some resources, and none of them were related to the field directly, but it's more about productivity, time management, making sure you're, that true north, and then some other things. But I think that time is so important because with farming, you could fill up 24/7, 365, but you've got to have some balance there.
Yeah. And just being able to think those things through, and what I'm worried about today, can it wait till tomorrow? And if the answer is yes, and enjoy the rest of your evening, because that work's going to be there tomorrow. As long as the animals are happy and healthy, you also got to be happy and healthy. And if you're working yourself to the bone, it can be very taxating on yourself mentally and physically. So it's very important to not only worry about your animals, but worry about yourself. And a lot of that boils down to time management.
Yes. I'm going to add one thing on there, Leevi, and whoever else is in your household.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes. And lastly, Leevi, where can others find out more about Greenacres and you?
Oh, that's great. We have a website, Greenacres Foundation. If you just Google Greenacres, it's one of the first things that pops up. We also have a YouTube page that is slowly growing, that has quite a few videos that show the diversity and opportunities that Greenacres has here, from gardening to livestock to all of the types of education. And then we also have an Instagram and Facebook page that you guys can check out.
Very good. And we'll put those links in our show notes for everyone to access. Leevi, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us today. Thank you. I think it's been a very valuable episode, and our listeners will really enjoy it.
Awesome. Thanks for the opportunity. It was great.
You're listening to the Grazing Grass Podcast, helping grass farmers learn from grass farmers. And every episode features a grass farmer and their operation. You can find the Grazing Grass Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and we encourage you to share our post. Are you a grass farmer? Would you like to share on the podcast about your journey and what you're doing on your farm? Go to grazinggrass.com and click on the Be Our Guest link. We are looking for grass farmers. Until next time, keep on grazing grass. Hey there, listeners. We appreciate you tuning in and want to continue bringing you the best content we can. But producing a podcast takes a lot of time and effort, so we need your support. You can help us out by joining the Grazing Grass community and becoming a supporter for exclusive content and early releases. Also, you can buy our merch to show your love for the show, or by using our affiliate links to purchase products or services we recommend. If you can't support us financially, please spread the word and tell others about our show. Thank you for your support, and we can't wait to bring you more great conversations from grass farmers like you.